Shalom, family, and welcome back to the Semitic Jew channel. This is the channel where we examine scripture through history, logic, and context, not European tradition, not emotions, and not cultural assumptions. Today, I'm going to deal with a book that is often misunderstood because people read it as history only, when in reality, the Book of Jude is not just historical, it is both historical and prophetic. So you may ask the question, why does this matter? Because most people read Jude and think that this book is just about false teachers back then. No. Jude is showing you a pattern that existed in the first century and a pattern that continues into the present. So, first of all, I want to begin with the context. Who is Jude writing to? Jude is not a European. He is not what someone would consider as white or white passing or Arab passing in the modern sense. Jude is writing to Israelites because Jude himself is an Israelite. So Jude is not writing to Europeans. He's not writing to a religious community. He's not writing to a random people. So people have to understand that when they're approaching these writings. Jude is not writing to a religious community. He's writing to ethnic people to whom he is a part of. So these are not detached converts to Judaism. Israelites is who he's writing to. Israelites living in congregations, living in assemblies. And so that's the point. Now, here's the key. The key is the corruption he's addressing is not coming from outside nations, because we know that the outside nations are considered heathen. We know that their customs are considered heathen. You can read Jeremiah chapter 10 and other references in the scriptures to know that God does not want the Israelites to mingle or adopt the cultures of other nations and their traditions. This is talking about from within the community, within the covenant people. But what's the problem that Jude is addressing in this book? He says it. He says, "For there are certain men crept in unawares." That is Jude chapter 1, verse 4. What does that mean? That means that they look like they belong. I'll give you a historical reference. Herod, for example, was not an Israelite. Herod was an Edomite. So Herod, being called the king of the Jews, could, in a sense, be like or named among the community, but not actually be in the community. So the Israelites can look like a people, and there could be someone who looks like them, and obviously, in their context, be as deceitful as the congregation itself. And so that's what you have to understand. They look like they belong, they sound and can adopt, or adapt, I should say. They can adopt to the teachings and adopt the Bible and adopt the culture, etc. You get where I'm going? They can sound like they belong, but they are operating against the truth. So this was a prophecy written a long time ago that is very relative to today. In fact, is very prophetic to today. And what were they doing? What were those people doing? They were turning the grace of our God, the Most High, into lasciviousness. Now, we know for a fact the people who are claiming to be us in the land today also are number one in the pornography industry. They're turning the grace of our God into a lasciviousness, denying the Lord. Who is the Lord? Christ, the Messiah, who did come. And that's Jude chapter 1, verse 4. So let's be very precise. This is Israelites misleading Israelites. Now, it can also be applicable to those who are without, who are claiming to be us and are culturally appropriating, whether it be passing as us by name, etc., as being misleading to their people as well. So again, we have to look at this very critically and logically, because here's the argument that Jude is making. He says there's internal corruption. Internal corruption is more dangerous than external corruption, even for them who have inherited lies, but even for us too, because you won't question what you are or what you assume to be familiar. You're just like, oh, this is nothing new. You won't question it. You'll say that this is how it should be. So if deception comes from within, guess what? It spreads a lot faster. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Christ even prophesied about it to warn them that, hey, tradition is already here. And these people are going to let tradition reign. And as a consequence, guess what? Religion is going to come later and it's going to spread, and which it has spread. Christianity, for example, Judaism, all those things our forefathers did not give us. Now, Jude anchors his warning in our history. So unlike them who are going to recite evidence of ancient Israelite history, they're going to do the exact opposite. They're going to culturally appropriate and says that all of them are white people or European looking or Arab passing or Middle Eastern passing in their line. But he references actual ethnic melanin history. The Lord having saved the people out of the land of Egypt. We know no white people came out of Egypt, or the people that are living over there. None of those people came out of Egypt. But they came out of the land of Egypt. Then afterward, guess what happened? Destroyed. God destroyed them that believed not. That's Jude chapter 1, verse 5. And the angels which kept not their first estate. That's Jude 1:6. Sodom and Gomorrah, Jude 1:7. But what's the pattern? Being part of the people does not protect you from judgment. Being a part of the Israelite community does not exempt you from judgment. So we have the character of corruption, because we have to know, what does that even look like? Jude describes them as filthy dreamers. He says that they despise dominion. So they don't want God to rule over them. They don't want to keep God's commandments. So they say, well, it's just faith. They're filthy dreamers. And they speak evil of dignity, or excuse me, or of dignities, things that are decent. They speak evil of those. They say, well, keeping God's commandments, that's not decent behavior. Or you should just keep faith, that brother. That's good enough. So they speak evil of when you want to keep the Sabbath. They speak evil of when you want to keep God's feast days. No, brother, those are not dignities. That's Jude 1:8. It's not a coincidence that that's happening in our time today. And then he compares them to who? He compares them to Cain. Rebellion, right? Cain is connected to rebellion. That's Jude 1:11. Balaam, which Balaam went after money. So corruption for gain, money. And again, I'm not going to say 501c3s, because 501c3s are not necessarily, I think that they use 501c3s illegitimately, but I believe that Israelites can use them to the benefit and glory of God, obviously, because anything in this world we can use to the glory of God. We just have to know what to do with it. And I don't mean eating pork, because that's still an abominable thing, but I mean like the systems. So Balaam, corruption for gain. That's Jude chapter 1:11. Then you have Korah, who rejected authority. That's Jude 1:11. So what defines them is not necessarily ethnicity, although they're claiming that, but behavior, mindset, motivation. Now, the ancient Israelites, obviously our culture and our ethnicity did define us and should define us and should be protected. If you watch the other Israelite summaries that I've given, identity is something that the Israelites wanted to protect, obviously, because if you don't protect that, then what's going to happen? People are going to culturally appropriate us, and so many things are going to happen after that. But not to get off track, the shift from this is definitely prophetic in application, because now this is where most people really stop when they read the book of Jude. We're not going to stop there, because if Jude is revealing a pattern, then that pattern does not end in the first century. It continues. So from internal corruption, now we have global doctrines, because you have to keep in mind when Rome ransacked Jerusalem and scattered the remaining Israelites that were there, it wasn't just about scattering them as a people. It was also taking their books and culturally appropriating and creating a religion, because global doctrine is very dangerous. But what starts even more so is the identity. Israelites misleading Israelites within our own communities, that happened. But then it expanded to something much larger. Now we have, again, Christianity, Catholicism, and then we have even 42,000 more Christian religions that evolved after that. You have to keep in mind, these people enslaved Israelites when the Bible 100% condemns slavery. So we have a global framework of teaching that is not reflective of the ancient Israelites whatsoever. Because once truth is distorted internally, it could be exported externally. So once it was exported and they adopted the books, now they can teach it how they want to teach it. They can also say that these people are the Israelites and these people are not. You catch me? So this present application is we have to name the system. We have to know and see that it's very direct and very precise. But you have to ask yourself the question, what does it look like when teachings that essentially came from the Israelites are taken, redefined, and then spread globally by other nations that are not Israelites? What does it look like? Because when that happens, the identity of Israel is redefined. They're like, oh, well, those people over there in the 1948 community, those people are the ethnic Israelites, right? They've spread that teaching, not the Bible. That's Christian Zionism. The covenant can be reassigned. Now it's the church, or even it's Judeo-Christianity. They can reassign it. You see what happens? And then the promises are reinterpreted as well. They're like, you guys, BHI, you guys are BHI. You're not the covenant community. And it's so ironic because unless we are a part of the church, I mean, if we're a part of the church, there's no problem. But once we have so much data, so many references, historical, not just the scriptures, obviously, that argue our position. But that's the primary one. But we also have ancient artifacts as well. Artifacts, history, deduction, logic. It only makes sense. So the promises are reinterpreted. So they say, oh, well, we're the new people, the church, or we have these white people who are passing as Israelites. But that is not preservation. That's replacement. They've replaced the ancient Israelites. God promised that the ancient Israelites would be scattered into the four corners of the earth. It means away from the land as far as possible. But somehow they believe that, oh, they were just right here in this homogenous location, which is ridiculous. So we have to do a scriptural check because we have to go to the scriptures with everything we do and say and think. So Paul warned that this exact issue would take place and had already taken place. He said in Romans chapter 11, verse 18, boast not against the branches, for I would not that you should be ignorant, lest you should be wise in your own conceits. That's Romans chapter 11, verse 25. So yet, what do we see historically? We see systems that emerged. The church replaces Israel. The covenant is no longer tied to a people, the identity of the Israelites. And so what happens? It becomes spiritualized and reassigned. That's what we call replacement theology. That's what Christians teach, and they're absolutely false teachers, 100%. And so connecting Jude to its historical place of dignity is very important to me. Jude warned us that it's in Jude chapter 1, verse 4. He says, truth is going to be distorted in the future. That authority is going to be redefined. They're going to tell you who the Israelites are. They're going to tell you what the Bible says. They're going to tell you that you're not Israelites. So the people are going to be misled from within, which is our community. And then you have other people that in our community that are saying, no, this isn't true, that we need to go to the church, or we need to respect modern day Judaism. So when you have those distortions globally, you're going to be looked at as like unauthoritative or not a critical thinking, or et cetera, et cetera. So these European theological systems, with their institutionalized Christianity through, as I said, Catholicism and their different numerical denominations and this Christian Zionism, this really isn't. I should say it's really not a new system. Rome said that the Bible belonged to them, and that they can tell you who Christ was. That's what they did. They told us that he was white. They told us that, oh, it's, the Israelites actually killed him. Or they say, black Israelites didn't exist, except they don't read Acts chapter 13 and other references that Paul was mistaken as an Egyptian, that Moses was mistaken as an Egyptian. Again, there were no white passing people in those regions ever prior to Alexander the Great. So again, we're not looking at something new. We're looking at the expansion of the same pattern that Jude identifies. So, why does this matter, Professor? I'll tell you. Because once that pattern expanded in the past, now it was, they created a taxonomy. And a taxonomy is just a fancy word of a system. We can say that it was even an ology, the study of how we're going to give this back to the people and give it back to them and say that God replaced his covenant people. So the text is still the same. It's still tied to the Israelites. The language is still biblical, it's still covenant framework. But the framework that they're using is no longer the original. And that's dangerous because it's looked at as legitimate. So I want to break this down logically because Jude is not just warning about individuals or individuals within our own community. He's exposing the structure in general of deceit that can come from within us and that is 100% without us as well. And so that operates, example, if someone says Jesus, you're not going to assume that he was black immediately. That's deception, even though he was. So it looks, you're not going to notice it. It gains influence. It redefines truth, spreads broadly. This is what happened. And that's exactly how false doctrine scales. It starts small and then grows. So the command that Jude gives us is found in Jude 1:3. He says, earnestly contend for the faith. He's not talking about Christianity. He's not talking about Eurocentric ideology. He's not talking about something that the Europeans gave the world. He's talking about the scriptures. That's what the faith is. The faith is the scriptures. And guess what? That comes with keeping God's commandments. So it's not a passive acceptance. You go to the altar and you say, God, please forgive me. And then all of a sudden you're secure. They like to use the thief on the cross, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but they like to use that as a reference point. It's not the case. Jude says contend, examine, test, challenge what they say. And he also gives the solution, believe it or not. He gives the solution. He says, building up yourselves, praying, keeping yourselves. That's referring to keeping God's commandments. And that's referring to not yielding to their systems, but relying on God who already gave us the text. That's Jude chapter 1, verse 20 to 21. So spiritual stability requires discipline. And discipline is challenging for a little while, but once you adapt to it, guess what? It becomes second nature. So it's more than just belief. It's much, much more. So I want to conclude you with this. Jude is not just a warning about the past. Jude is a warning about a pattern of corruption that began within our people and that expanded into systems that they learned from us that influenced the entire world. And again, not all of these systems we authorized, but some of these systems they had already had, but they took it and corrupted it and polluted it. Like God told us not to eat certain foods. Well, they say, well, all foods you're free to eat, and taking the scriptures to justify the ignorance. But if you cannot identify that pattern, then you will inherit their doctrines. And then you'll no longer be a reflection of Christ. You'll be a reflection of the beast. So I want to transition you to this. If this helped you, please consider watching the other videos on the New Testament series and reflecting on the things that I mentioned in here. Because I feel like God now is obviously pouring his spirit out on people so that we are waking up to the truth. And the next series I want to look at, or the next book I want to look at, is the Book of Revelation, where the systems, their power structures, and then the final outcomes of those things are fully revealed, which is why anyone who reads the Book of Revelation is blessed, and anyone who does not add to it or take away from it is also blessed. So I'll see you in the next one. Shalom, family, and God bless.